Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. I could tell as soon as Danny showed her in that this D was trouble. Not that she was trouble, but that she was bringing me a world of trouble that wasn't of her doing. Just a feeling I had as I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. "Hello, Mr. Carter," she asked nervously. I could tell she was married, as most of my clients were. "Nick Carter, Mom." I nodded. "No, not like the punk kid singer, though I sometimes get mail for him. One of the hazards of being a PI with a famous name who lives in LA. My dad actually named me after a secret agent from a set of dime store novels by Joe Publishing. We already had the last name. My dad just named me Nick, not Nicholas. Go figure." I rose as I spoke and shook her hand. "What can I do for you, ma'am?" "Your assistant said that you could help me. I was referred by one of your previous clients." She smiled a bit, still nervous. "I see. Okay, Mrs. I'm Janine Linder. My husband is Dennis Linder, and he's a psychologist. I have reason to believe he's cheating on me, and I want proof before I file for divorce," she said, handing me a picture of him. I raised my eyebrow as I regarded the photo. He looked to be about 40, with a square jaw and dark hair going gray at the temples. He had bright green eyes that would probably tempt most women. "Okay, ma'am, you know how this works?" I asked. She nodded. "Good. Give me 2 weeks tops, and I'll have the evidence you need. For those 2 weeks, I charge $5,000. Is that acceptable to you?" "Yes, and half up front, correct?" she asked. "Do you have your own account that your husband doesn't know of or have access to in order to check your finances?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I set it up a couple of months ago, so he wouldn't know if I hired someone to track him. Your former client says that you are the best." She smiled, then handed me a cashier's check for $2,500. "Thank you, ma'am. Give me an idea of how he's been acting suspicious, if you would. The more information I get now, the easier it will be to track his movements." "Well, it's a bit strange that I even caught on that he was cheating. He spends every night with me and the weekends too, but sometimes when I call his office for a lunch date, his phone is turned off," she said. "Well, he could have a client run over during a session," I shrugged. "Normally, you would be right, but then there's the distance at home. He used to be all over me, but now he hardly touches me. Then I noticed the perfume smell on his clothes. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but it wasn't my brand of perfume," she said. "Some of his clients could have hugged him." "And how old is he?" I asked. "He's 44, she said. And I nodded. "Well, I heard that men that age have lower sex drives than they did before hitting 40. Could that be the reason for his distance emotionally?" "You sound like you think it's just me being stupid," she said angrily. "No, ma'am. I'm just trying to figure out why you would think he's cheating. I admit the perfume is a pretty heavy indicator, but it could just be circumstantial. I'm going to take this case, but I also need to know everything you can think of. How is he acting suspicious besides turning his phone off?" "Well, it's always just before lunch on Mondays and Wednesdays. Other times he answers right away, but on those days it goes straight to his voicemail." "Okay, I think I get the picture. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so I'll start my investigation then. I will be in touch as soon as I have anything concrete for you." I nodded and rose from my chair as she did and shook her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I hope it's nothing, to be honest, but I need peace of mind on this." She smiled warmly. She really was a knockout, and if I hadn't been married, I might have considered consoling her. "Anytime, Mrs. Linder. If I don't find anything at the end of 2 weeks, you will not have to pay me the remainder of my fee. It's my guarantee." "Thank you again, Mr. Carter," she said. "Mom, call me Nick." Mr. Carter was my dad. I smiled, and she smiled back. "Okay, Nick. I'm Janine. Ma'am is too formal." "Okay, Janine. I'll be in touch as soon as I have anything for you. Danny, my assistant, should have your information, so I'll get your number from her." I showed her out and promised again to be in touch. As soon as Janine had left, Danny came in and plopped down on the overstuffed chair in front of my desk. Daniela Velasquez has been my assistant for 6 years. I would honestly be lost without her, and I think she knows it. She's single, dates some but not often, and has the most gorgeous jet black hair, doe brown eyes, and a great tan that comes from her Mexican heritage. She's built like J-Lo, but with more junk in the trunk and way more of a rack. Yeah, if I wasn't married to the woman of my dreams, Danny would be in trouble. I might be married, but I'm not dead. And I never touch, well, except for hugs. Okay, Chief, this is what I got for you right now, she said, handing me the file she put together online about our target. Danny is a pretty good PI in her own right, and I was proud to be the one who taught her. She's a quick study, that's for sure. Dennis Linder, psychologist extraordinaire. I looked at the file, and a warning bell went off in my head. It seemed that a former patient had filed a malpractice claim against him a couple of years back, but the claim had been dropped mysteriously, with some stock cliché answer given as to why. This was getting more and more interesting. The former patient was female, and her husband had divorced her soon after the malpractice claim had been dropped. That was the warning bell. I had a bad feeling about Dr. Dennis Linder, and my gut is usually right. Danny, dig a bit deeper on this prick, will you? I've got a bad feeling about him, I said. Danny giggled at my phraseology. Yeah, I know. I opened the door for that one. And thanks for not stepping through it. Anytime, boss man. She winked at me prettily, then stepped back out to her desk to do some more searches on Dr. Linder. Daniela is worth twice her weight in gold, and I know that. I don't pay her enough, even though I pay her very well. We're more partners than boss and assistant. We split each case 60/40ths, including retainer fees. Those retainer fees, when added up between multiple clients, equal over $200,000 a year after expenses. I usually clear $50,000, and Danny clears $110,000 easily. And that's after taxes. We share a lawyer who gives us legal help quid pro quo, since we kind of work for him too. Wesley Quinton is his name, and divorce disputes and other domestic issues are his game. Then there's my wife, Samantha. Yes, Samantha Carter, formerly Samantha Stern, so no relation to Colonel Carter on Stargate SG-1. She goes by Sammy for short. I met Sammy 7 years ago when I had quit the company I was working for in Langley, Virginia, and moved back to LA. I was an insurance investigator for that company. It was a decent living, but after a client in Paris turned out to be a real prick, I decided I'd had enough and put my investigative skills to good use back home. I had enough saved up to start my own PI business. Sammy is a complete knockout. Tall at 5'8", which puts her even with me in height when she wears her 4-inch heels, fiery red hair, sparkling blue eyes, 34C24 to 36 measurements, and legs that go all the way up to heaven. Her Angelina Jolie lips and sexy smile can melt the hearts and raise the, well, you get the idea. She has it all packed in the right places. I first met Sammy back when I had solved my first case for my first client. He threw a bash to celebrate me finding and returning his property. I was his guest of honor, and Sammy was the daughter of one of his friends. She saw me, and I saw her, and it was as if the magnetic force of the earth drew us together. We talked and danced, and talked some more. I met her father, who was a good man, and he bought my usual line about being a former insurance investigator who decided to go into the private sector as a PI. I had prospects, and during the shindig, I managed to score some more clients. That was 7 years ago, and after dating for 6 months and living together for 6 more months, we were married in a small ceremony with just her family and a few of our friends. My parents had died a few years back in a car wreck when I was out of the country, and had left me their house in their will. I spent 3 years in the Army as an MI interrogator, then got recruited by the aforementioned company to investigate possible insurance fraud. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Anyway, I became a damn good investigator and realized I could make some damn good money at it as a PI. So I bid the company adieu and headed back home to lay. Getting a concealed carry license was like pulling teeth, but it was worth it to carry my dad's old Colt M1911, a one pistol. The big 45 ACP ammo, pretty much guaranteed a kill if fired with accuracy. That was one thing I've always been good at, shooting. So I went out to where Danny was picking out bits and pieces of Dennis Linder's life and printing them out for me. Hey Danny, go ahead and knock off for the day when you're done with the searches. I'm heading home. I smiled at her. No problem, Chief. She smiled back at me with more than professional respect. You know, I hope Sammy knows what she's got at home. I think she does, sweetie. You know, you're going to make some guy really happy someday, if you ever settle down. I winked at her, flirting a bit. Not likely. I missed my chance by a few months, she shrugged. I opened my mouth to ask her about that, but she had already turned back to her computer monitor. Okay, so go ahead and get the info, folder it, and I'll be in first thing to pick it up. Good night, I said as I headed toward the door. Good night, boss man, she called out as I left the office. I got in my car and headed home. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking about Sammy and how she'd been acting lately. Over the past couple of months, she'd been kind of distant, as if she had something on her mind and wanted to tell me, but it always seemed as if something was holding her back. I resolved that when I got home, I was going to ask her about it. Until she told me, I would be an idiot not to see the writing on the wall. I'd seen it enough over the years. The story was always the same. The wife or husband was emotionally distant, either just before or just after starting an affair. Thus far, she kept telling me nothing whenever I asked her what was wrong, or if she wanted to talk to me about something. Why women do the whole nothing routine, I'll never know. I know a few don't, but most of them seem to think guys get paid enough to read minds. Sorry, ladies, we're not psychic. Sometimes you have to spell it out for us. It was with those thoughts in mind that I pulled onto our street and noticed the Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo parked out in front of my house. As I was pulling into our driveway, my cell rang. Hey baby, I said when I saw my wife's name on the caller ID. Hey Nick, where are you? Are you going to be home soon? We have something to discuss with you, she said. Her voice sounded weird. What do you mean, baby? Who's the we you're talking about? I had my suspicions that the we included whoever drove that Jeep. Just come home as soon as possible, okay? Okay, baby. I love you, I said. Okay, bye. Now the alarm bells in my head had turned into a full-blown klaxon. I made sure my pocket recorder was in my pocket and ready to go, and that my cell phone had picture capability. I readied my camera function just in case. I had no idea what had gotten into Sammy. She never failed to tell me she loved me, even lately. Once I was breathing deeply, doing some breathing exercises to calm myself. I got out and took a snapshot of the license plate on the Jeep. I had a real bad feeling about this one. My gut was screaming at me, and I've always listened to my gut. As soon as I got out the door, I saw them kissing. They had no idea I was that close, and I managed to get a snapshot of them together with their lips locked. I walked in as calm as could be, snapping happily away until they noticed me. I hit the record button on my pocket recorder. Where else but my pocket? Oh my God, Sammy, I said, you scared me. Nick, care to explain why you're kissing some prick in my house, soon-to-be ex-wifey? I asked, eyebrow raised as I shut my phone. It's part of the reason why I wanted you to come home, Nick, she said. I looked at the prick for the first time and suddenly had the urge to pull my weapon and put a hole through his head big enough to drive a Mack truck through. Dennis Linder, my current target, was standing in my living room and towering over me. Okay, this was a sticky situation. My client's husband was now standing in my house and apparently screwing my wife. Right then, I wanted nothing more than to shoot him dead, and her too, for that matter. My heart was breaking, but my anger kept the hurt at bay for the moment. However, if I was going to get paid, I had to play this cool. Vengeance would come later. Payback is a witch and a half, and these two were going to feel every bit of it. Okay, what is it you want to talk about? I asked with much more calm than I actually felt. Mr. Carter, may I call you Nick? He asked. No, only friends call me Nick. You're not a friend. You're the a-hole who's screwing my wife. Therefore, we will never be friends. Got it? I asked with a sneer. Yes, well, I'm Dr. Dennis Linder, and I'm treating your wife with sex therapy, he said, identifying himself. Okay. Does sex therapy include kissing my wife in my home? I asked, eyebrow raised once again. As a matter of fact, right now it does. I know this is highly irregular and probably difficult to swallow, but you will need to watch us while we're doing it, he said. Dear God, this guy was dumber than a box of bowling balls. He was playing right into my hands and solidifying not only my own divorce proceeding, but making sure his wife gets everything, except for my alienation of affection and malpractice lawsuits that I was already planning. I just looked at him for a moment. Dr. Dennis Linder, I heard you're really good at what you do. Psychology, right? I asked, buttering him up. Yes, psychology. My methods are sometimes controversial, but I always get results, he preened. So how long has my wife been going to you for therapy? I asked, biting back my own outburst that was straining to get out. 2 months now, he confirmed. Sammy had said nothing about going to see a shrink. I looked at her then. Sammy, if things were so bad, why didn't you just talk to me? I told you years ago, when we were dating, that if anything was wrong, you could come to me. Don't you remember that? I asked, trying to get through to her. I guess, she said in a hesitant tone of voice. She had a confused expression on her face for a moment. Sammy, remember what we talked about? Dr. Linder said. Control. You have to assert your control. I know you don't like being powerless, so you have to take the lead. Remember? His voice was strange, almost hypnotic, as he talked to her, and I saw her expression harden. You're right, Dennis. I need to show him that I'm not just some dumb woman to be pushed around. She then glared at me. Sammy, what are you talking about? I almost shouted. When have I ever pushed you into anything? In the bedroom. We always make love how you want, never how I want. She almost screamed at me. Okay, Sammy, you know what we said after we were married. That if we wanted to try something new, we'd just discuss it and see what happens. Remember that. All you had to do was ask, and we could at least talk about it. Once again, her expression turned to one of confusion, but before Dr. Dick Nugget could say anything, her expression hardened again. Nick, I need to do this. I need to see what other tools are out there for me. You can either watch or don't watch, but I'm going to do this, she said firmly. Sammy, don't do this. Please. What I really wanted to say was, give me more evidence, please, but I refrained. I would be getting way more evidence than I needed. Nick, this won't affect us. I still love you, she said with a hint of a smile. I knew she was lying to me then. I just need something different. Just this once. Oh, well. For the record, I do not want you to do this, and there will be consequences if you go through with it, I said, shaking my head in what I hoped looked like pure resignation. Mr. Carter, please allow me to do my job. Now, do you have a chair in your bedroom? He asked. He wanted to screw my wife on our marital bed. Note to self, burn the bed and get a new one. We do. Yes. Wait, do you really want me in there? I asked with a horrified look on my face. It is necessary, yes, Dr. Dumb said. If you insist, I snarled. Doctor, is there no other way to get my wife back to normal? None, I'm afraid. he said with mock sincerity that wouldn't have fooled a kindergartner. "Well, I hope you don't expect me to participate in adultery," I said pointedly. "Mr. Carter, what your wife and I will be doing is hardly adultery. I am merely helping her to get past the mental block and assert herself better in your relationship. You will both be stronger after we're done." He gave me a smarmy smile when he said that, and once again, it took an Olympian effort not to shove my pistol down his throat and empty the magazine into him. "I'm not agreeing to this, just so you know. I will never agree to an act of adultery performed by you and my wife. And this is adultery, no matter how you slice it," I said, noticing that he wasn't wearing a wedding ring and seeing no sign of a tan line on his finger. As I said, "Mr. Carter, this is therapy. Granted, it's controversial therapy, but it is not adultery." His smile this time was condescending. Oh, this was going to be very, very fun. After a bit of pain. Well, not pain. My love for Sammy had died, and I was feeling numbness and a keen sense of righteous fury at what I was going to do to this a hole after he finished screwing my soon-to-be ex-wife. Since my wife had agreed to all this, she was damaged goods, and there was no point in fighting for her. The only thing I would do now was gather all the evidence and ensure they had a meeting with Karma. She was not worth jail time anymore. I'm still not agreeing to it. I shook my head, even as I'd followed them to the master bedroom. I surreptitiously took out my iPhone and started the camera rolling as he undressed Sammy and had her lie on the bed. Sammy undressed too, and neither one of them looked my way as I sat in the chair to get plenty of footage. "Last chance, you two," I said. "Don't do this. This is being done without my consent," I said to ensure it was recorded and that I had not consented to this act. The doctor looked at me with my iPhone sticking up out of my jacket pocket, but he didn't realize it was recording video. He sneered. "Like you have a choice in it, punk." He then thrust forward into Sammy. And that was it. That was all I needed to see. It was all I needed to record. Janine's case was now airtight, and that was that. I stood up from the chair and walked calmly to where Dr. Needle Dick was laying into Samantha with relish and abandon. I grabbed him by the hair and yanked hard, pulling him backward and out of her. I then hit the nerve bundle between his neck and shoulder, and he folded like a bad poker hand. He was still conscious but unable to move. "You thought I wouldn't do anything, doctor. My ex-wife never told you what I do for a living, did she?" I could see the confusion on his face. Sammy was glaring at me now as if I had grown a third eye. "I'm a private detective, doctor. I now have evidence of you attempting to cuckold me with my wife. Now I have the proof I need for an infidelity divorce. I have video and audio. I also now have proof of alienation of affection and malpractice." I grinned in triumph, then reached to my belt and drew my sidearm. "See, you're a big man, doctor. I might lose to you in a straight-up fight, but Colonel Sam Colt makes all men equal in the eyes of God. You should be able to move in a moment. Once you can, get dressed, grab your things, and get out of here," I said calmly and evenly, which scared the living hell out of both of them. I heard Sammy gasp. "Good." I looked over at the woman who had just broken my heart. "Samantha, you need to get dressed, pack your things, and get the hell out." "What?" she demanded. "You heard me. I told you there would be consequences if you went through with this, and those consequences are going to be pretty bad." I felt detached, as if my emotions weren't functioning as they should. "Those consequences start now. You will pack your things, put them in either your car or his SUV, and leave. I'm going to call my attorney and have him draw up divorce papers, then get a restraining order against you and the good doctor here. I'm just glad we don't have children, and damn glad that I will never be a father to your children." I shook my head. "Sammy, you broke my heart. I hope it was all worth it for you." My voice cracked during that last sentence. "If Loverboy here doesn't want anything to do with you, go stay with your folks." Sammy's face went through a variety of emotions as she processed what I had just told her. Her main emotion appeared to be confusion. "But Nick, don't you love me anymore?" she asked in wide-eyed, innocent shock. "Not after you willingly let another man, over my protests, take you in our marital bed." I shouted that last bit. "You have desecrated the vows we took on our wedding day, Samantha. Over my protests, you shat all over everything we ever had." Yeah, I really let her have it this time. I wanted her to hurt. I wanted her to feel a measure of the pain in my heart when I figured out that she didn't love me anymore. "I can't believe that I never even knew you, Samantha," I said, calling her by her full name since I knew she hated it, and because she knew that I only called her that when I was angry. "Samantha, do you remember the talk we had shortly before we got married? The one about fidelity. Remember that one? The one where you said that you would not tolerate cheating. The one where you said you had zero tolerance for cheaters. Well, honey, this qualifies. I saw the wisdom in your words that day and adopted your philosophy." The doctor stirred before she could reply and appeared to be giving serious thought to jumping me. I stepped away from him, keeping Sam Colt trained on him. I also made sure I kept Samantha in my field of vision. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Carter. I'm going to press charges," he sneered. "No mistake. I caught you in bed with my wife and thought she was being assaulted. Who are the cops going to believe? The respected private investigator who caught a criminal or the man who claims it was all consensual? Look at Samantha, doctor. Look at the anguish on her face. The anguish of being assaulted. It's a good thing I got here when I did, isn't it? Otherwise, you might have gotten away with it. Now maybe I should call the police and report this." His face paled as he hesitated, then thought better of it. "Fine. No harm, no foul." He tried to chuckle, but it fell flat. "No charges." I noticed that he still hadn't mentioned his wife. That was interesting. He probably thought he was keeping a secret from me, and I would allow him that illusion for now. I had to prod him a little, though. "I'm sure the news stations are going to love this one, though. Pie's wife caught in bed with her psychologist. Story at 11. I shook my head with a disgusted look on my face. That was when he blanched. "No, you can't go public with this," he nearly shouted. He was dressing quickly, making sure he had everything he came in with. "Please don't go public with this." He was begging now. I had him. "If you return all the fees my soon-to-be ex-wife paid you, I might consider it. I'm still pressing a case of alienation of affection and malpractice against you, though," I said, backing him into a corner. "Done. Anything you want," he said with a panicked look in his eyes. "Anything I want? Oh, the possibilities." But no, I wanted him to know fear. I wanted him to feel the fear before the inevitable despair, the total devastation that his life was about to become. I was enjoying myself over this, and I felt no guilt about screwing him over as he had screwed me over. The difference was that while he had screwed my wife, I was going to screw his life, with no lube and a sandpaper condom. Once he was dressed, he ran from my bedroom, and I heard the front door slam as he broke all land speed records getting away from me and my home. I looked at Samantha, and I could tell that she saw the malice in my eyes. "Nick, we can get through this," she pleaded, crying crocodile tears. "Please, baby." Where was the baby when I got home, Samantha? Where was the love then? I sneered. "Get dressed, get packed, and get out. You have an hour. Since doctor doesn't want anything more to do with you, I suggest you go to your folks." Samantha just looked at me in utter shock. She then started dressing and packing listlessly. I let her use all 4 of our suitcases, knowing that I was just going to buy new ones. I stepped into my home office and called the locksmith and the furniture store. I got the locksmith just as he was closing, but promised him a huge bonus to do a rush job on my locks. I then told the furniture store that I wanted a king-sized bed to replace our old queen-sized one, along with new sheets, a comforter, and the whole 9 yards. It was expensive but worth it. The salesman asked why I wanted the old bed thrown in my backyard, but I just told him that I wasn't paying him to ask questions. He picked up the tone in my voice and wisely shut his trap. Samantha was packed in 55 minutes, and in a magnanimous gesture, I helped her take her suitcases out to her car. In other words, I threw them on the driveway by her car's trunk. I then walked back into the house and slammed the door behind me. I called Wes and had him file for a restraining order with the county court judge. I named both Samantha and Dr. Dennis Linder in my complaint. I then had him draw up divorce papers, alienation of affection papers, and malpractice papers. An hour later, both the locksmith and the furniture guys were done, and I paid both with my credit card. I called the credit card company and canceled Samantha's cards. I then called the manager of my bank at home and had him cancel Samantha's debit card. I gave no explanations, but as the primary on our accounts, I felt it necessary. I no longer trusted her. For those who think I was going too far, go to hell. I poured myself a couple of shots of Chivas. Now, I'm usually a beer man and love beer beyond all other forms of drink, but I needed something stronger, so I poured my shots and sipped them as I thought about the train wreck my marriage had turned into in such a short amount of time. Around 7 p.m., I knew I was about to lose it. I called Danny. "Hola, Chief," Danny said. "Hey yourself, Danny. I hate to call you after hours, but I'm going to need your help tonight," I said. I was proud that the 2 shots of Chivas hadn't impaired my judgment or slurred my words. "What's wrong, boss man?" she asked. I never could put anything over on her. "Well, it's complicated, and I don't want to tell you over the phone. Just come to my house," I said, feeling the walls starting to crumble in my mind. "Okay, Chief, I'll be right there," she said, ending the call before I could respond. God bless that girl. 10 minutes later, she was knocking on my door. I got up from where I'd been staring at the blank TV screen and went to answer it. As soon as I opened the door, Danny was throwing herself into my arms, hugging me tightly. She kicked the door shut behind her, then disengaged from our embrace long enough to throw the deadbolt. When she turned back, she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the couch. She sat me down and sat next to me. "Okay, where's Sammy?" she asked, already having some inkling of what was going on. After all, Sammy's car wasn't in the driveway, and I wasn't as distraught as I would have been if she had died. I looked into the deep brown pools of Danny's eyes. "She's gone, probably to her parents' place. She was cheating on me, Danny." I could no longer hold my tears in check as she put her arms around me and held me while I ruined her blouse with my tears. I clung to her desperately, just needing the human contact. When I'd finally let it all out, Danny pushed me back gently and looked into my eyes. "Nick, listen to me. Are you absolutely sure that Sammy was cheating on you?" Not trusting my voice, I instead pulled out my pocket recorder and hit play as I set it on the coffee table. I then opened my cell, brought up the video, and hit play before handing it to her. Danny watched and listened with growing horror in her eyes as I went and got 2 beers from the fridge. By the time I got back, a dark fire was blazing in her eyes, and she had stopped both the recording and the video. I opened both bottles of Arrogant Bastard Ale and handed her one. Danny finally exploded after taking a swig of the bitter ale. "That witch," Danny growled, not holding back. I cracked a wry smile at her words. Danny is loyal to a fault, and she's loyal to me. She took another long swig, then closed her eyes and breathed deeply several times. "Nick, what are you planning?" she asked, then laid her hand on mine. "Because whatever it is, I want in." "Nuclear strike on the doctor," I said, my voice cold. "I have reason to believe that maybe Samantha was brainwashed. If so, I want to get her the help she needs." My voice was hoarse from the crying. If there's even the slightest possibility that the a-hole somehow brainwashed or coerced her, I want to find out how. But as for Dr. Dingleberry himself, I want him, and all those around him, to burn. Except for his wife, who you met earlier at the office. Turns out she was right about him cheating, and it was with my own wife. This is some mess, Nick. Danny shook her head in sympathy. But okay, what's our first move? Recon. Of course, I said with a tight smile as I compartmentalized my feelings for the moment. Now that I was on the job, it was easy to slip back into the professional persona. In a few hours, I'm going to pay his office a little visit. If you have a problem with breaking and entering, you don't have to come. I told you I'm in. Chief, I'm in it to win it. And you know I don't back down, she said with a smile, then leaned forward and hugged me tightly. I know Sammy, Nick. I've known her almost as long as I've known you. I think she's been coerced, at the very least by that cabron. I think so too. But even then, I'm not sure I want her back. She's been all over this guy. She's known this tool for 2 months, and in that time, he managed to convince her that our marriage was just another toilet bowl to take a dump in. I said, still hugging her tightly. God, she felt good. I pushed her back gently as my body started stirring and looked into her eyes. There was something there that I hadn't seen in Samantha's eyes in a long time. Lust. Pure, unbridled lust. And I was sorely tempted to kiss her right then and there. There were only 2 things stopping me. 1, I was hoping that Samantha was a victim of brainwashing or coercion here, and that we could somehow work through all this. 2, even if she was more willing than she appeared, I wasn't going to stoop to her level and cheat with anyone, even Danny. Danny, I know what you're thinking, and you have no idea how tempting it is right now, but we have a job to do. I forced out the words through sheer iron will. I steeled my resolve and pressed onward. We need to swing by the office and pick up the van. Good call, boss, she said, curbing her own feelings. It didn't take a rocket scientist to see that she'd always had a bit of a crush on me. We flirted back and forth, but I thought she was okay with just flirting. But now that Sammy was out of the picture, at least for the moment, it was obvious she wanted more. Part of me was dying to give her what she wanted, and that part of me wanted it just as badly as she did. But, and here's the kicker, I was not going to do what my wife had done. No, my vengeance was going to be far more terrible if things went as I feared. Also, I didn't want to hurt Danny, and I knew that if Sammy had been coerced or brainwashed by Dr. Linder, Danny would be hurt badly when I decided to work things out with Sammy. We left in her car and picked up the van at the office. I grabbed the Comcast sign magnets out of the back and slapped them on the sides of the van. Urban camouflage. Got to love it. We drove to the offices of Dr. Dennis Linder at around 11 that night, and I went into the office building by picking the lock. I was wearing supple casing gloves that kept my fingerprints off of anything, while allowing enough freedom of movement that my dexterity wasn't impeded. Picking the locks was child's play. Once inside, I made sure my earbud was working properly so I could communicate with Danny. Reading you loud and clear, Chief, she said. I had a small USB thumb drive with 50 gigs of storage on me. My plan was to search his computer, as well as his filing cabinets. I wanted to get a really good look at this guy's business. If he was doing this to my wife, I wondered how many other wives he'd done it to. The security system was child's play as well. I called the security company, identified myself as Dr. Linder, and told them that I had forgotten my passcode. It's amazing what the power of a good bluff can get you. I sounded authoritative and slightly pompous, and they bought it without even asking for a confirmation password. Amateurs. Danny giggled over my earpiece. I know, right? I chuckled quietly as I picked the lock to the doctor's office itself. I made a beeline for his computer, bringing it out of sleep mode. There were no family pictures on his desk. Wow, he didn't love his wife very much. I shook my head. Big a Hole, who had a hell of a hot woman at home, was stepping out with at least one of his patients. Password protected. Okay, don't panic. I reviewed what I knew about Dr. Linder. He was intelligent, if not very street smart. He was cunning when it came to seducing women. On the ride over, Danny had given me the other dirt she'd dug up on Dr. D-Bag after I'd left. He was a serial womanizer. When we read between the lines of other patients of his who had filed malpractice or even pressed sexual harassment charges against him, those charges were always dropped without real cost. Just some cliched misunderstanding when asked by the cops. I already hated the guy. Now I was ready to kill him slowly and with great enjoyment as he suffered the ultimate in physical and emotional pain. So, with his womanizing tendencies in mind, I typed in Romeo as a possible password. Access denied. Casanova. Access denied. Lothario. Access granted. What a predictable a-hole. Finding the files I needed wasn't difficult either. Wow, this son of a witch was arrogant. I popped in the thumb drive and downloaded his entire special patients section, which damn near filled the entire 50 gigs of space. I noted some of the names, including Samantha Carter. That creep had video files of Sammy on here. Fine, whatever. I ejected the thumb drive and sent his computer back into sleep mode, then rifled through his filing cabinets. I found Sammy's file, but nothing in it seemed to indicate what they had done. He wasn't completely stupid enough to list his sexual conquests in his paper files. Anything yet, Chief? Danny asked over the earpiece. Lots, darling, I replied. Nothing on paper, but I've got about 45 gigs of videos he's recorded with quite a few of his patients. Damn it. Okay, we're going to need to look those over when we get home, she said. I had a funny feeling about the way she said we and home when talking about our plans for the immediate future. When I left the office, I made sure the doors were all locked and that there was no trace that I had ever been there. No security cameras, just a phone call I'd made from a burner phone with an untraceable number. Voice ID could cause a problem if someone cared enough, but I wasn't going to worry about it right then. It was well after 1 a.m. when we got back to my place. We got inside after I put the garage door down, and before I could say anything, Danny blindsided me. I'm staying the night with you, Nick, she said firmly, leaving no room for argument. Okay, I shrugged. You can have the guest room. No, Nick, I'm staying in your room. In your new bed. And I'm not taking no for an answer. You shouldn't be alone tonight, even if we don't have sex. And there it was, out in the open. The invisible elephant had been revealed. Danny, I trust you. You're about the only woman on earth I trust right now. I'm asking you to please don't make me break my marriage vows tonight. Okay, I asked. I promise, she said with a smile, then kissed my cheek. We'll go over the footage in the morning. I brought my laptop so we can split the videos and get through them twice as fast. Sounds like a plan, sweetie, I said as I headed to the shower. I felt filthy, not just because I hadn't had a shower since before I went to work the previous morning. As I stood under the water, my mental compartment opened, and all the feelings of betrayal came rushing back. I was sobbing against the wall of the shower when I heard the shower door slide open. The next thing I knew, I was being held by a wet and naked Danny. She held me close, stroking my back as she washed me. I would have probably taken her without a second thought, something I would at least regret in the morning. Instead, she dried us both off, then guided me into my bedroom. She didn't even bother with pajamas or a nightshirt. She put me in bed, covered me with the sheet, and then climbed in on the other side. I numbly fell asleep shortly after my eyes closed. I was completely exhausted, physically and emotionally. I awoke the next morning with a smile on my face. Sammy had spooned me during the night, her body pressing into my back. I shouted and jumped off the bed like it was on fire. It wasn't Sammy. It was real. It wasn't just a dream. Sammy had really cheated on me and left me. Danny got up and hugged me close. God, she was putting on the full court press with me. I decided to nip it in the bud. Danny, listen to me, okay? I choked out. At her reluctant nod, I continued. Danny, I'm sorry for that just now. I thought yesterday was just a really bad nightmare. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think of you in that way sometimes. But I love my wife, or who she used to be, before that scumbag got his hands on her. But I promise you one thing right now. If Samantha went along with this all willingly, I'm going to divorce her. When that's done, if you still want me, I'm more than willing to try with you, okay? And that's one reason I fell in love with you. She sighed in resignation. You're the most honorable man I've ever met. Her voice was equal parts admiration and exasperation. Thanks, sweetie, I said, kissing her cheek as I released her naked body. I got a good look at her without the tears in my eyes, and she literally took my breath away. She was tan all over, with no tan lines. Dear Lord, I was being tempted like I'd never been tempted before. Like what you see, Pappy? She gave me a seductive grin. Aha, I managed, all the blood in my body pooling elsewhere. Danny looked down and smiled but didn't reach for me. When this is over, and if you aren't with Sammy again, I'm going to screw your brains out for the rest of our lives. Happy, she whispered, which made my body respond even more. Danny, if I'm not with Sammy when the dust settles, I'll let you, I whispered back. I got dressed, and Danny left the room. But soon, I heard the sizzle of the frying pan out in the kitchen. I smiled at that, then got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, put on my belt with the holster, and went out to join her. I didn't usually wear my pistol at home, but I wasn't going to take any chances with a possibly sociopathic psychologist out there. I noticed that Danny was also wearing her piece, a Lady Smith & Wesson in 9mm. She'd gotten her concealed carry permit shortly after I hired her. Smells good, I said with the first genuine smile I'd had since this whole mess started. Thanks, Nick. She shot me a cute grin, then went back to turning the omelet she was making. I smelled bacon in there, as well as cheese and salsa. She really knew her stuff. She was dressed in one of my old t-shirts and the jeans she'd worn last night. Her blouse was still on the floor in the bedroom. Danny, I know this is going to be tough on both of us, I said as I sat down on a bar stool at the kitchen counter. She looked at me and raised an eyebrow. Boss, I didn't sign on to be coddled. You made it clear from day one that I would most likely be needed on some cases, and with my background in criminal justice, you knew you could count on me. That hasn't and won't ever change. I couldn't help falling in love with you, but that doesn't mean I'm going to shy away from this one. This case is personal to me too, since Sammy is my friend. That Dan doctor is going to get a rude awakening by the time we're done with him. Every word she said was true. She'd been a detective for 2 years in the LAPD, but had been drummed out for beating a sexual assault suspect half to death. She'd been lucky to avoid serious charges, but as the son of a witch had been guilty, they didn't want the bad publicity of filing charges on her. She'd been given a nice severance package to keep her mouth shut about the circumstances of her termination. She'd been upfront about it with me when I first interviewed her. It was one reason I'd given her the job. I wanted someone who wasn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Danny was definitely not afraid to get her hands dirty. Sometimes I just forgot that about her. You're right, I nodded. Danny, I need to tell you something about me that not even Sammy knows. I took a deep breath. I knew I could trust Danny. She trusted me, and I had verified the veracity of who she was and why she'd been fired. What do you mean? She asked, a confused look on her face. Danny, I never worked for an insurance company. I worked for the company as a covert operative. There. My name is Nick Carter, and I used to be a spy. That sounds like a really bad impression of the opening of Burn Notice, Danny said, then plated our omelets and brought them to the counter along with mugs of coffee. God bless Danny. I sort of figured that. It was either that, or you had a criminal record someplace, she shrugged. Always looking around like someone might be watching you. You don't show it much, but I've spotted it over the years we've been together. You know a lot about bugs and how to tap a phone in record time. And then there's your lockpicking ability, which rates right up there with the best cat burglar in the business. I laughed outright. She really was a hot detective. You're good, I said, raising my mug of coffee to her before taking a sip. Just right. Oh, and you make the best damn coffee on earth, just so you know. It was her turn to laugh. "Thanks, boss," she said. "I'm not just a pretty face and a hot body, you know." She winked. "I know. If you were just those things, I wouldn't have hired you." I shrugged. She leaned over and gave me a kiss on the cheek. "Thank you, Nick. No matter how this goes, thank you for everything." She smiled. "Hey, you act like you're going to be leaving." "Not going to happen," I smirked at her. "You'll be working with me until we're both old and gray." She just regarded me for a moment. "You know, you're right." She grinned. "I couldn't leave you if I got a job paying $1 million a day." "Good," I said, "because I can't afford that, and you're the best damn assistant I could ever hope for." "I'm glad you finally acknowledged that, boss. Now eat your food before I smack you." She stuck her tongue out at me. I stuck mine out back, then really dug in. Her omelette was amazingly good. God, that girl can cook. There are two schools of thought about the way to a man's heart, and all that stuff they teach girls. One is through his stomach, and the other is through his will. For me, it's both. Once breakfast was done, I helped Danny with the dishes. When we finished, she turned, and before I could react, slipped her arms around my neck and pulled my face to hers. She kissed me passionately, and for a few seconds, I returned her kiss just as hotly, our tongues dueling for dominance. Then I backed off, blushing like a schoolboy. "I'm sorry, Nick," she said quietly. "No, Danny, I don't think either one of us is sorry for that." I chuckled. "Damn, I wish I'd met you before my wife." "So do I," she said sadly. Someone was going to end up getting hurt, no matter how this turned out. I really didn't want it to be either of them. If Sammy had been coerced or brainwashed, we had to watch those videos. "Come on, let's go watch those vids and see if they can shine some light on Sammy's mental state," I said. We went into the den where I kept my home office, and I downloaded half of the videos to her laptop. I started where I needed to start, with Sammy. The first interview was pretty basic, just a getting-to-know-you session. Dr. Dick Suckert was jotting stuff down in his notepad while asking Sammy questions about her life. He asked about her husband, me, and about her other family. She told him about her parents and how much she loved us all. I studied his face and saw a sly little smile play across his lips at that. He asked a few more innocuous questions and told her not to speak of this to anyone, as it could adversely affect their future therapy sessions. That son of a witch had set out to seduce her from the start. Since she had followed his instructions on keeping me in the dark, I had no clue what was going on. I couldn't have done a damn thing to stop it. He had abused her trust in him as a medical professional. Malpractice suit. Check. The second video was more questions. More personal questions this time. He asked her about our sex life. She answered truthfully, and I couldn't help feeling a swell of pride when she admitted that I gave her multiple climaxes each time we had sex. He just jotted stuff in his infernal notepad about each answer she gave. He asked some more personal questions that she seemed reluctant to answer, but he reassured her that nobody else would ever know about what she said. She answered truthfully again. It ended with him reiterating the need to keep the session confidential, and she agreed. I checked the dates on the videos. There were 16 videos of Sammy's sessions, corresponding to his Monday and Wednesday appointments. I groaned as I put my face in my hands. The third video was difficult to watch, but once again, he didn't brainwash or coerce her in any way other than through professional ethics. She told him about her fantasies. A lot of them I already knew about and had helped her fulfill. Some, however, were things she'd never told me before. She wanted to tie me up. She wanted to dominate me in the bedroom. Jesus, she'd never said anything to me about those. Once again, after she was done telling him what he wanted to know, he stressed the need for secrecy and sent her on her way. The fourth video was when he started his insidious seduction in full. He asked her to describe her domination fantasies in detail, so she launched into graphic descriptions of what she wanted to do to me. I listened raptly to each thing she said. She got through 2 of them before time was up. Once again, the secrecy agreement, and she was on her way. The 5th and 6th videos were very similar to the 4th. The 7th and 8th videos were more fantasies of hers, ones that involved screwing me. I was beginning to see why she wouldn't have told me about these fantasies. I just shook my head as she told him personal things about herself that she had never shared with me, her own husband. Then he suggested having 2 men at once to her and showed her a video clip of a woman in a sandwich, with one guy from the front and the other in the back. When she saw that, the wheels in her brain started turning, and she said she would think about that one. That was his kicker, and I saw his sly grin of triumph at the end of the video. He once again urged her to keep their sessions confidential, and then let her go. The rest of the videos were mostly him talking to her about her fantasies thus far. He enumerated each fantasy and pointed out how she was actually a dominant personality that had been subservient all her life and had grown to accept it. First, she was subservient to her family. Then she was subservient to me. He built up her self-worth to the point of egotism by the end of the 14th video and had convinced her to have 2 men, including me, as part of her therapy. I noticed that starting in that one, he didn't urge her to keep quiet, knowing she wouldn't tell anyone, including me. It was the 15th video where he first screwed her, just a little under a week and a half ago. He told her that he would be the second man if she wanted him to be. She said she didn't know. She looked like she struggled with the decision for a solid 15 minutes as he gently urged her toward where he wanted her mind to be. She finally gave in, and he laid down on his desk and told her to dominate him. She did. The 16th video was the last. She came in, and before he could say anything, she kissed him passionately and then screwed him hard. She said that she didn't just want a 2-on-1. She wanted to cuckold me with him. That was the clincher right there. It showed me that she was beyond saving. She made a conscious decision to cuckold me instead of the original plan of having sex with her along with him. This time, she told him to keep it quiet and that she would call him with the right day and time. I stopped the video and looked up to see Danny looking at me with tears in her eyes and a disgusted look on her face that probably mirrored my own. "That guy is a serial seducer," she said softly. "Or a real louse," I replied. "That makes sense with his password on the computer, at least. On hitting the son of a witch with a legal warhead so big, he's going to wish he'd never been born," I vowed, my voice calm but deadly. "I'm with you on that one, boss," she said, sitting on the edge of my desk. "It seems that the longer video sets are more challenging. If it makes you feel any better, all the others are shorter than Sammy's." She held out the longest, apparently. She shrugged and gave me a hopeful smile. I sort of figured that since all the remaining ones were shorter, but her confirmation solidified it. "This guy makes Machiavelli look like a saint," I said, shaking my head. "But as far as coercion or brainwashing goes, he's not guilty on those counts. He just convinces them it won't hurt anyone." "Yeah, I noticed that too," Danny agreed. "From what I can tell, he's never involved the husband before in their little games. But then the husband finds out somehow and divorces his wife. All the ones I've checked so far ended up in divorce." She listed the names of the women and their ex-husbands. "Okay, contact a couple of the exes and find out how they learned about Dr. Dick seducing their wives. I need to talk to Janine," I said, motioning her out of the room. Danny nodded and left, while I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Janine's number. "Hello. Janine, it's Nick," I said tightly. "Oh, Nick, thank you for calling. Are you going to start your investigation today?" she asked. "I've completed it, actually. You were more correct than you know," I replied. "Oh," she said, her tone curious. "Is there any way you can come to my house, either tonight or tomorrow? There are some things we need to discuss, both personal and professional. Don't get me wrong, I'm not hitting on you, but this case has hit a bit close to home for me," I explained. "Care to elaborate on that, Nick?" she inquired. "Not over the phone, ma'am. Either tonight or tomorrow morning would be best. My assistant, Danny, will be here with us since she has some info to share as well." "What's your address?" she asked. I gave her my address, and she promised to be there in 10 minutes. 11 minutes later, I saw a car pull into my driveway. It was a nice Jaguar XJ6. I opened the door for her, and Danny brought her a cup of coffee while I fetched mine and Danny's laptops. Once I'd set them both up on the coffee table, I sat on one side of Janine while Danny sat on the other. "Janine, Dennis is a serial cheater who uses his position of professional authority and trust to seduce women and cuckold their husbands," I began. "From what we've seen so far, he only targets married women. There are no single women in these videos. Each video series chronicles his seduction," Danny added. "He gains their trust, talks about fantasies or problems in their marriages, and then uses that information to manipulate them into doing exactly what he wants. He doesn't coerce or brainwash his victims," I clarified, "but he's a serial offender. As you can see." I showed her the folder of videos we'd recovered. She gasped when she saw how many there were. "How the hell could he have kept this a secret?" she screamed, her face turning beet red with rage. "Janine, stay calm, please. There's more," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "More?" She looked at me like I had just fallen from another planet. "Yes, Mom." As I said on the phone, this one hit really close to home for me. "You see, my wife was his latest conquest." I highlighted Samantha Carter's name in the list of video series. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry, Nick." Janine hugged me tightly. "He's going to pay for this. Be sure of that. He's going to pay through the goddamn nose." "Janine, how much is your husband worth monetarily?" I asked. "I'll be filing alienation of affection and malpractice against him. Don't worry, I'll introduce you to the best damn divorce attorney in California. Wes will take good care of you and get you as much as possible." Janine laughed bitterly. "Oh honey, Dennis is worth over $250 million, including his properties around the world. He has a lucrative practice, his books are bestsellers, and he's been on Dr. Phil as a guest several times. The majority of his money comes from his books, though." "Okay, here's what I propose," I said. "We hit him with a blitzkrieg, hard and fast, but it's going to take a few days to set up. Do you trust us?" I gestured toward Danny and myself. "Yes," she said firmly. "You've lost a lot too, Nick. I'm sorry for that. I should have seen what a snake he was. For this to work, you'll need to maintain appearances," I explained. "Act normal around him for 2 more days. Claim female problems or go out of town to visit your mother. Something believable. Meanwhile, I have a guest room here with a queen-sized bed and room for 2 more cars in my garage." I handed her a remote for the garage door, which she accepted gratefully. She decided to pack and stay with us while Danny went home to pack as well. Danny returned half an hour later with enough clothes for a week, hauling her stuff straight into my room and putting it in Sammy's old dresser. The girl was determined. I'd give her that. The next morning, Janine arrived just as I got out of bed after another great night's sleep. Danny, now in one of my oversized t-shirts and panties, was in the shower when I heard the garage door go up. Janine gave me a sympathetic hug and a kiss on the cheek when I went to meet her. She had a small suitcase with a couple of changes of clothes and some bank statements for Dennis's accounts. I gaped at the amount of liquid assets he had. After another great breakfast, cooked by Danny, we discussed our plan. We needed to notify every ex-husband and ex-wife of the most recent developments. There were 11 ex-husbands to call. Once notified, they could call their ex-wives to let them know what was going down. Our plan: separate lawsuits for malpractice and alienation of affection. Most of the ex-husbands were more than ready for payback, and even a good number of the ex-wives were chomping at the bit. Not surprisingly, I wasn't about to involve Sammy in this. After seeing the last video, she didn't deserve to be part of the fallout. I showed up at Wes's office later that morning, accompanied by 9 out of the 11 ex-husbands we had been able to contact, and all 9 of their ex-wives. Since I was ex-husband number 12, I was also in on the action. Wes, to save time, had drawn up identical alienation of affection and malpractice papers, swapping out names and details as needed. He was like a kid in a candy store, handling well over $175 million in liquid assets and nearly $100 million in properties worldwide, all of which would likely be liquidated to pay for the malpractice, divorce, and alienation of affection suits. Sure, a class action suit would have been simpler, but we were going for shock value. I wanted Dr. Dennis Linder to know his world was about to come crashing down around him like the walls of Jericho. Janine, Danny, and I waited at the back of the line, watching Wes happily assist his new clients as they prepared to make Linder's life miserable. Each person left with signed paperwork and a promise that their case would be delivered to Linder bright and early Monday morning by different process servers, all at the same time. When it was finally our turn, Wes first helped me file for divorce from Samantha and then assisted Janine in filing for divorce from Dennis. Wes seemed immediately taken with Janine, and the attraction appeared mutual. While he worked on her case, I leaned toward Danny and whispered, "Think Wes is about to land himself another client in more ways than one." Danny smirked. "Oh, absolutely." After we finalized our papers, Wes agreed to throw in restraining orders against Linder for both Janine and me, for free. That little bonus was part of his investment in our growing alliance of clients. Once everything was prepared, Wes set up the plan for Monday morning. Different process servers delivering every lawsuit and divorce paper to Linder's office simultaneously. Danny and I, along with Janine, would have front row seats. That afternoon, we launched Phase 2. This involved saturating the media and law enforcement with the juicy details of Linder's behavior. Using the videos we had found, I edited together a damning compilation. I blurred out faces and altered voices, removing all references to Sammy or my name to protect ourselves. The final product showed how Linder manipulated married women into destroying their relationships for his own gratification. The media would eat it up, and the FBI and California Board of Psychology were bound to take notice. To cover my tracks, I used a dummy email account and several proxy servers. There was no way this could be traced back to me. On Monday morning, right after the process servers did their job, I hit send on the mass email delivery, initiating Phase 2. Danny, Janine, and I sat in my car parked across from Linder's office, popcorn in hand, as we watched the chaos unfold. Linder came running out the front door, a stack of legal documents in his hands, looking frantic. His eyes darted around wildly until they landed on us. I held up my phone, gave him a cheery wave, and drove off. The last we saw of him that day, he was kneeling in the parking lot, screaming incoherently at the sky. My vengeance wasn't even halfway over yet. Phase 3 began with a sit-down conversation with Samantha, which she had agreed to. We met in a very public Starbucks to ensure nothing would escalate beyond words. "I'm here. Does this mean you want to talk?" she asked hopefully as she sat across from me. "As a matter of fact, I do. I need to tell you something," I said with a smile that felt empty even to me. "Samantha, I would have forgiven you just about anything if you had been coerced or brainwashed by that a-hole. But after watching 16 hours of you willingly go along with everything he said, even with your protestations, you ended up suggesting cuckolding me to live out your domination fantasy." I shook my head slowly. "That I cannot forgive or forget. Samantha, I would have done damn near anything for you. I loved you more than you can possibly know. Loved, as in past tense. I would have given my life for you until I saw that ultimate betrayal of everything we meant to each other." She opened her mouth to speak, but I slid the divorce papers across the table to her. "You've been served," I said flatly. "I think you'll find it fair, considering." She stared at the papers in shock. "You're kidding." I wasn't in my right mind. "Baby, please, you have to believe me," she panicked. I let the other shoe drop. "If I were you, I'd think of something to tell your parents, Samantha. Something tells me they just got an anonymous email showing them what kind of daughter they raised." I stood and walked out, leaving her in stunned silence. Later, Wiz called me to let me know Sammy and her lawyer wanted to renegotiate the terms of the divorce. I agreed to meet at his office, bringing Danny for moral support. Wiz greeted us with his usual smug grin, clearly relishing the impending showdown. Samantha's lawyer, a sharp-looking woman who resembled a younger Gloria Allred, wasted no time in claiming my terms were unacceptable. "I believe my proposal is more than adequate," I replied, sitting back. "Considering I have video evidence of Samantha planning to cuckold me, including audio recordings and video footage of her adultery." We started the DVD we'd prepared, which included key clips from the final 2 sessions and a recording from my pocket recorder. The cherry on top was my iPhone footage of them in the act. By the time the video finished, Samantha's lawyer looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Samantha was pale, her eyes brimming with tears. "Take the deal," her lawyer said quietly. "Smart move." We all signed the papers on the spot, with Janine notarizing them. Samantha walked out without another word, her head hung low. That evening, I went home with Danny. As soon as we got inside, I pulled off my old wedding ring and tossed it onto the coffee table. Turning to Danny, I saw the love and patience in her eyes. I swept her into my arms, carried her to the bedroom, and closed the door on my old life. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.